What if Super served the Imperium and Helldivers were dropping into the battlefields of the 41st millennium? Today we're going to talk about that and bring your Helldivers into Warhammer 40k. I know a lot of you guys are big fans of Helldivers. You've played Space Marine 2 as well, and you probably wondered the same thing I have. What would happen if we had a crossover here? What if Super Earth and the 41st millennium merged and gave us a special unit? The reality is they already basically exist in Warhammer 40k, and we're going to talk about it today. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Say hello to democracy!
Hey everybody, today's video is brought to you by Dubby. Dubby is a clean energy drink company that does a lot of really cool stuff. I'm not a huge energy drink person, but I've come around to these guys. They sent me this cool limited edition flavor that I've really enjoyed so far, as well as a bunch of sampler packs, and my personal favorite, Dubby Hydro. Dubby Hydro is basically Gatorade on steroids without all of the bad chemicals mixed in there. It's been really great to experiment and try that out. And unlike a lot of the super artificial, nasty tasting energy drinks, in my opinion, not a huge fan of Monster or Red Bull, but this nice clean flavor that is very few ingredients. And if we look at, I don't know if you guys can see that there, there's maybe 10 ingredients total, and most of them are fruit extracts that keep you nice and healthy and give you the energy you need throughout your day. So go check them out at w.gg/wargamer, or use the code word wargame in your checkout to get 10% off. There'll be a link down in the description below for the starter kit. You can also get other flavors there as well. I'm a huge fan of those, and I definitely would recommend it.
For Super Earth!
So, as many of you guys know from the lore of Helldivers, there's going to be some big similarities and some pretty stark differences between the two. The first being pretty simple. They are both heavily militarized cultures, which lends to a lot of that same aesthetic that you get between the two. Obviously, Helldivers are more of a democracy, whereas Warhammer 40k, the Imperium is more of an oligarchy, almost, somewhere between a theocracy and an oligarchy. But the two still seem to blend pretty well. There's a lot of in-between, and it's not hard to imagine that Super Earth is a planet in the Imperium, because a lot of the Imperial governors run their planets very differently. There are democracies inside the Imperium that serve their governor, who then serves the Imperium, and those worlds don't tend to see as much of the theocracy and the oligarchy that goes beyond their planet as they do their planet itself. Now, we got to see this a little bit with Cadia and a few other places throughout the books. Although Cadia is far more military driven than Super Earth is, Super Earth has that line between the soldier and the average civilian, whereas Cadia doesn't, because they don't have a choice. They're forced to at least be militia trained. But this leads to a place where Super Earth could actually fit in. So let's talk about what Helldivers would actually look like when it comes to an Imperial army.
Prove to yourself that you have the strength and the courage to be free. Join the Helldivers.
So in Warhammer 40k, there's a couple different units that we use to kind of combine and mesh to give us the Helldivers. You have the Militarum Tempestus, who's going to be the core of it. They're probably about 80% of it. You do have some of the grimdark aesthetic that you get with the Death Corps of Krieg. So you're using some of those pieces to kit bash as well to get that feel. And you have the Elysium drop troops, which are currently in Legend. So you can't just use the Elysium drop troops on your tabletop unless you're just playing a fun game at home or at a game store and everyone's okay with it. But you can use old pieces and kits to kit bash yourself some really cool Helldivers. So let's jump to the actual units and talk about what this army composition would look like, so that we can make sure we have the walkers and transports and everything we need to really bring the Helldiver aesthetic to the battlefield. So like we just talked about, for this particular unit, we're going to be pulling from the Astra Militarum to really build out our Helldivers team and put them onto the battlefield. It'll be a little bit weird because in gameplay purposes, your Helldivers tend to play a little bit closer to Space Marines, and you could do a Space Marine chapter that way as well. But I feel like they're closer because they are humans just augmented to the Tempestus Scions and the Tempestus Aquilons than they are true Space Marines. They may be close to like a Reaver, but building an entire army that way just won't work. So in the end, I decided to go with the Astra Militarum for this. So let's talk about that list, and I'll give reasons for why I put some of these units in there, as well as what type of aesthetic we'll be looking for. So we're going to start this off with our Warlord. I went with Acadian Castellan. You're going to want to kit bash him to fit better. You can use the new Death Corps of Krieg commander as well if you want to go that direction, but I feel like the Acadian Castellan just gives you more kit bashing and tweaking options. Next, I added a Commissar. The Commissar is there to keep track of the units. He's just a standard staple in Warhammer 40k for all Astra Militarum units, except for maybe the Death Corps of Krieg. So he was an auto-include as well. On top of that, I did include a Militarum Tempestus Command Squad. This will be our first unit that will look very Helldivers-esque and have that representation to really fit in better. I'd also give you a few extra heads and things like that that you can use to change your Commissar and your Castellan to fit the aesthetic better. Next, I went with 3 squads of Tempestus Aquilons and 3 squads of Tempestus Scions. And that's going to make up the core of our infantry. Now, the big thing with Helldivers is they are very mechanized as well. So, in order to get this filled out, I went with 3 Armored Sentinels, a Basilisk, a Lehman Russ battle tank, a Rogel Dorn battle tank, 3 Scout Sentinels, so that'll give you 6 Walkers in total, a Wyvern, and 3 Chimeras. So this is going to be a very mech-heavy army, as well as a very mobile army. You're going to want to use those Chimeras to transport your troops anywhere you can go, letting your drop troopers edge around and take objectives while your Sentinels deal with the bigger units. And while your infantry is a little bit weaker than a lot of the stuff you're going to see on the tabletop, combined with this type of armor and walkers and things like that, you should be able to actually see a pretty good push and quick movement strike force like you would with Helldivers. So that's the actual units we have. So let me know in the comments below if you think that's a good list or if we should make any changes to it. I'd love to hear your opinions, especially if you're guard players. We have a Gaunt's Ghost army here that we just play in-house. It's mostly 3D printed. So it's just a fun one we enjoy. But I would love to hear from actual guard players if this is something you think would be a fun army to play on the tabletop. Next, let's talk about how much this is going to cost us to build, and then we'll get you tabletop ready.
Victory, Helldiver! Victory! The enemy is in retreat. Super Earth has been defended.
So as you know, when it comes to cost, we kind of break this up into 2 different categories for these Fiction to 40K videos. We do the retail cost. So if you're going to go into a Games Workshop store or go to gamesworkshop.com, this is how much it's going to cost you. This is going to be the full price that you will pay, period. The second number I'll give you is the value total. The value total is going to be based off of Amazon and Wargame Portal. They're my 2 go-tos for online pricing. I did do them box by box, so there will be value boxes and combat patrols, things like this that you can use to get that price further down, and I would recommend it. We do not include any third-party resellers in this just because I can't guarantee that by the time you watch this video, they will still be available, and I want to keep this as long-term correct as possible. So let's talk about the full retail price first. This army is fairly expensive. It's not the most expensive we've done on a list like this, but it is on the more expensive end, which isn't surprising for an Astra Militarum unit, especially since we've got so many unique units and so many vehicles, and because we're doing this at the full retail unit by unit price. So if you were to do this piecemeal unit by unit and only go through Warhammer.com and through the Warhammer store, this is going to run you $1,219, which, like I said, isn't astronomically terrible for an Astra Militarum unit. I've seen considerably worse, but still not the world's best when it comes to Warhammer 40k armies. So next, let's talk about the value cost. I was able to find almost all of this exclusively on Wargame Portal, which does tend to have a little bit better deals than Amazon most of the time. And Amazon's a little bit less reliable for price. But I was able to save about $175, so it drops us down to $1,081.95. So not a huge savings, but also not bad. That is going to be enough to actually get excited about when it comes to savings. Plus, like I said, if you look at combat patrols, if you look at kill teams and things like that, there are ways to actually save more money and field these units for less. So I would absolutely recommend looking into that if you're wanting to do this. So next, let's talk about how to paint the army and get it battlefield ready, and then we'll talk strategy after that.
Another step closer to a successful operation.
Okay, so now you've got your army purchased and built, and you need to paint it. Well, the Helldivers are simultaneously some of the easiest and hardest paint jobs to pull off and make look good. If you're looking for just a basic tabletop, it looks pretty good from a distance paint job, this is going to be super easy. If you're looking for that detailed, refined edge, when somebody can pick it up and study it closely and think it's amazing, maybe win some paint contests, this is going to be a hard one. So for this, like I said, you're going to do some kit bashing. I'd recommend somewhere between the Death Corps of Krieg as well as your Militarum Tempestus. And if you can, use some Elysium drop troops. If you have them, they're hard to find. So if you can kind of blend those three together, you're going to get some really good looking models. Now, when it comes to painting, most Helldivers have a black undercoat. Obviously, because of it being a video game, there's a lot of custom mods and things you can tweak. You can also use a very dark gray or almost a rough iron color. The rough iron paint from Army Painters would be a really good, it's a dark brown, almost black metallic that looks really, really good on stuff. It's one of my favorite for terrain, as well as some accent colors and things like that. I think if you were to base this in that color, you could probably pull it off. Be warned, it does not play well with an airbrush. So you're going to have to hand brush it, which may be a deterrent for you. And if that's the case, going with a black or dark charcoal is probably going to look best. Next, your accent color is mostly yellows, neon yellow, as well as some more tans and things like that will be used for accents in a standard Helldiver. But once again, mixing up color schemes and changing that up is pretty common in the game. It's not unusual to see Helldivers with different colors instead of yellow, but yellow is the standard. So having that be your base and then having sergeants with blue, some of your commanders with red, or however you want to break that up is perfectly fine and works great. So you can have a lot of fun with this paint scheme. You can even do camo patterns instead of black. You can do a lot of really cool things. So that's why I say if you're just doing a tabletop ready quick paint, this is going to be easy. You black, you yellow, then you do red for the eyes, and then I love metallic markers. So I've got like a dark gray one that I use to edge on black. Gives me nice clean edging that looks good and pulls out all of the edges and accents on a black surface. But that's up to you guys how you want to do that. So that would be my recommendation for paint job. Basing is going to be another one that's pretty simple as well. I would do a rocky surface, maybe lean a little bit to the reds for the base paint, for the undertone, and let it run that way. But once again, that's entirely up to you. There's so many different variants you play in Helldivers 2 that basing options are pretty all over the place. You can do whatever you want. So let's wrap up by talking tactics and get you back to the tabletop. Okay, so tactically, I'm going to use the Bridgehead Strike detachment. Now you can use a lot of different variants of this when it comes to how you deploy it, how you play it, and that's fine. You can do it however you want based on your opponent. That's cool. I did this one because it gives you a lot of fire zone purges as well as bonuses and buffs to rapid deployments and communications and orders. So I felt like this would be the best fit if we're trying to make the aesthetic feel of Helldivers. And that's going to be the way I'm going to be playing this as well. I'm going to be using my vehicles to coordinate and move and control the board in the back end, while my jump troops will be moving to capture objectives and do different things around the map to score me points. It's going to be pretty similar to how I play some Space Marine Legions, like my custom Space Marine chapter that I'm about to start painting here actually later this week. But it's going to take some feel and some time. You're going to have to play every single army a little bit differently, because if you get trapped with your infantry, you could very quickly lose that match and get board wiped pretty quickly. And a lot of your punching power is going to be coming from your tanks and your sentinels. So maneuvering and positioning is going to be very, very important, as well as the use of orders and things like that. And once again, if you're an Astra Militarum player and you have suggestions for better options, please let me know below. I enjoy playing against Astra Militarum, and I do on a fairly regular basis. But I also know there's so many different ways to play Astra Militarum. It's kind of in that Space Marine category that every single player is going to play it drastically differently and get drastically different results. So if you have suggestions, recommendations, let me know in the comments below. And if you have a fictional universe you want to see in Warhammer 40k, let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy doing these. They're a lot of fun to dive into and get creative with. On top of that, if there's any lore accurate lists you guys want to see as well, let me know in the comments below as well. We're going to be doing some more 40k content as well as some video game content coming up. But I always love to hear what you guys would like to see, and I'd like to focus on that. And finally, don't forget to go to tylertartar.com, where you can get Readers of the Wargame merch. That will be linked in the description below. We've got a lot of really cool stuff. And here, coming up in just this next month, we should be getting a couple new shirts added as well. So get back to the tabletop and have fun.